They never looked at you the same after you started expecting more. Not asking, not pleading, expecting. The moment you stopped smiling at mediocrity, their tone changed. Suddenly, you were too cold, too intense, too serious. But nothing had changed except your tolerance. You weren't loud about it. You didn't give a speech. You just became quiet in the exact moments where you used to explain yourself. And that silence, that stillness, exposed everything. The ones who once leaned on your kindness now feared your distance. The ones who loved you most when you were bending backwards started feeling threatened when you stood up straight. They didn't fear losing you. They feared losing the version of you they could control. You thought loyalty meant giving your best. But in their world, loyalty only had value when it meant losing yourself for them. This is where most people break. Not from heartbreak, not from conflict, but from the quiet betrayal of realizing they were never loved, only used. They don't regret what they did. They regret that you finally saw it. That's the moment you wake up. Not with rage, not with revenge, with clarity. Loyalty is a currency, and most are bankrupt because the real ones don't fear consequences. They fear disappointing you. If you've ever been the one they lied to, the one they ghosted, the one they swore they'd never betray, then did anyway, you were never the problem. You were just too loyal for people who treat everything like it's temporary, even you. And now you're done. They don't betray you when they cheat, or lie, or walk away. They betray you the moment they realize you'll forgive it. Watch closely, the betrayal never begins with an action. It begins with an assessment. They scan your limits. They test your silence. They observe how many times you choose peace over principle. And when they feel safe in your softness, that's when the mask drops. Because loyalty, to them, was never about respect. It was about access. As long as they had access to you, your time, your energy, your protection, they felt no urgency to preserve it. That's why betrayal doesn't shake them. They already did the math. They knew you'd come back. And when you didn't, they panicked. Not because they lost someone they loved, but because they lost someone who made them feel safe in their worst behavior. The truth? They don't miss you. They miss the advantage they had over you. That's what most never admit. They weren't in love. They were in power. They felt powerful knowing your heart was loyal even when theirs wasn't. They felt powerful knowing you were still kind, even while they were careless. They felt powerful every time you stayed, even when your silence was screaming to leave. And the second you became indifferent, they collapsed. Not outwardly, not in front of you. They collapsed behind 100 distractions, 1,000 justifications, and 1,000,000 cheap replacements trying to fill the void of a loyalty they'll never find again. Because no one fears losing someone easy to replace. They fear losing someone whose presence makes betrayal feel like treason. That's the kind of person you were meant to become. Unshakable, unavailable, unbetrayable. Not because you don't feel, but because you don't chase. Because when you stop chasing loyalty from the disloyal, you start becoming someone they fear to disappoint. You want loyalty. Make it cost them something. Not in pain, in presence, in pressure, in precision. When you walk into a room and your energy doesn't beg, doesn't seek, doesn't sway, people start calculating, not out of fear of you, out of fear of what they'd lose if they crossed you. You think loyalty comes from love. It doesn't. It comes from consequence. Not loud, not violent, not reactive, but the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't flinch when they walk away, because you were never holding on to them. They were holding on to you. Here's the truth. The world is not loyal to the kind. The world is loyal to the uncompromising, the ones who never explain their standards. The ones who don't beg for respect, they assume it. The ones who give loyalty only where it's earned daily, not owed blindly. And when betrayal enters that space, there are no second chances, no emotional negotiations, no spiritual bypassing, just distance, cold, calm, final. That's not cruelty. That's the law. Because Machiavelli was right. It is better to be feared than loved, when love is shallow and fear is silent. But the fear we're talking about is not fear of punishment. It's fear of disappointing someone who could have made you powerful but chose to keep you close instead. That fear is rare, because you've been the opposite. You've been the one who warned them first, who reminded them gently, who gave the benefit of the doubt long after the doubt was confirmed. And what did it earn you? Exactly. So now, you operate differently. You don't wait for betrayal. You don't ask for clarity. You don't explain what loyalty means, you embody it. You don't react when someone tests you. You remove the test. And in that removal, they see it. Not the rage, not the sadness, the standard. And that's what they'll remember, long after they forget the lies they told. Long after the excuses rot in their throat, they will remember the day they made you indifferent, because that is the day they lost their only shot at being loyal to something real. There's a moment that changes everything. It's not when they betray you. It's when you realize they were never afraid to. Sit with that. You thought loyalty meant giving them grace, giving them space, giving them time to grow into someone worth trusting. But all you did was teach them that your silence was permission. You thought you were being understanding, but to them you were being predictable. Predictable people get played. Predictable people get overlooked. Predictable people get betrayed, because no one fears the consequences of failing them. That's the core. People don't betray who they respect. They betray who they expect to take it. You were loyal because you saw potential, but they were disloyal because they saw no price. And now, you understand the law. Loyalty isn't about being there for people when they're at their worst. It's about not tolerating people who get worse the more loyal you are. There's no virtue in staying loyal to the disloyal. Only vanity. Only a fragile ego trying to prove it can handle what it should have walked away from the first time. So now, your loyalty becomes rare, sacred, strategic. You no longer love with both hands. You love with alignment. If they rise, you rise with them. If they lie, you leave. No revenge, no closure, no final speech. Just subtraction. Because loyalty isn't proven by how long you stay. It's proven by how fast you leave when they show you they're not worthy. That's the loyalty you owe yourself. The version of you that's watching quietly from within. The version that knows what it feels like to be disrespected in silence, manipulated with charm, discarded with excuses. That version of you needs your protection more than anyone else ever did. So protect it. Be the person they fear to betray. Not because you threaten them, but because betraying you means losing access to someone they'll never find again. And they know it. They knew it all along. They just gambled that you'd never find out. Now you have. There's something they'll never admit. They never believed you would leave. Not really. You were the one who forgave without being asked, who understood without being understood, who stayed loyal even when they started to drift. They saw your softness as permanence. They mistook your endurance for weakness. They told themselves, you need them more than they need you. So they tested. More lies. Les efforts, longs silences. They wanted to see how far they could stretch your loyalty before it snapped. And you played your part, until you didn't. Because betrayal doesn't always look like a knife in the back. Sometimes, it's the slow decay of someone losing respect for your boundaries, because you never enforced them. That's what changed you, not the betrayal. The realization that you trained them to believe you'd always stay, no matter how little they gave back. And now, your absence is louder than your presence ever was. They don't say it out loud, but they feel it in the moments where they used to feel you, in the empty room that still smells like your discipline, in the messages they type but don't send, in the sudden silence of your indifference. This is what they fear, not your anger, not your replacement, your peace. Because when you're at peace, you're gone. Gone from the emotional chaos. Gone from the need to be understood. Gone from the cycle they kept you trapped in through guilt, charm, and false promises. Now, you operate above it. You are no longer the one trying to be chosen. You are the choice, and people feel it. The way you carry yourself without explaining, the way you respond without defending, the way you leave without warning. That presence, cold, quiet, unshakable, it speaks a language most can't fake, because it doesn't come from power. It comes from pain, transformed, forged, hardened. And now, the very people who once played with your loyalty would give anything just to feel safe in your presence again. But they won't. Not because you hate them, but because you finally respect yourself more than you miss them. The ones who used to lie to you now lie about you. They say you changed. They say you became cold, arrogant, distant. But that's not the truth. You didn't change. You just stopped apologizing for having standards. And when you stopped letting them rewrite your reality, they had to rewrite you to justify the guilt they didn't want to face. They'll say you're heartless, but they forget. You gave them every version of your heart, and they didn't respect a single one. So now they're left with the version that doesn't care. That's what people don't understand about the emotionally disciplined. We weren't always this way. We used to plead. We used to explain. We used to cry in private, then smile in public just to keep the peace. But peace without respect is just a pretty prison, and you don't live in prisons anymore. Now, they feel the weight of what they lost. Not just you, but the version of themselves they liked better when they were around you. Because when you are loyal to someone beneath you, they don't rise to meet you. They pull you down to justify staying where they are. You carried people who would have let you drown. You protected people who watched you burn. You forgave people who would have never done the same for you. And in the end, you weren't rewarded. You were resented. Because nothing threatens the weak more than someone who was once soft and chose to become strong. You became the consequence they never thought would arrive. The living proof that once you master your emotions, no one can use them against you. Now, people speak your name differently, not with entitlement, but with calculation. They replay old messages. They watch your life from a distance, wondering if there's still a crack in your armor. But there isn't. There's no revenge, no bitterness. Only standards, sharp, silent, untouchable. You are no longer the one who gets betrayed. You are the one they fear to disappoint. Because you don't threaten. You vanish. And in that silence, they finally understand the value of what they lost. This is where you become untouchable. Not by being feared, but by being unreachable to the disloyal. You don't block them. You don't announce your exit. You don't explain your worth. You disappear like a storm that never touches the ground and still leaves everything shaken. Because the moment you begin to honor your presence like a weapon, every room you walk into adjusts. You say less. You observe more. You speak only when it shifts the temperature. They try to provoke you. You give them nothing. They try to bait you with apologies. You give them silence. Because loyalty is not something they can beg for now. It's something they had and threw away. You've outgrown the version of you that needed people to make it right. You don't need closure. You are the closure. They say, you've changed. But what they mean is, you no longer allow me to hurt you. They say, you're so distant. But what they mean is, I no longer have access to the version of you that I could control. They say, you're acting different. But what they mean is, I've run out of ways to keep you beneath me. And now they respect you. Not because they finally see your value, but because you finally stopped giving it away for free. This is the final stage of becoming dangerous. When you stop managing how people perceive you and start controlling what they're allowed to access. Your presence is no longer a gift. It's an earned privilege. You walk like someone who knows their time can't be wasted. You love like someone who knows detachment is the highest form of control. You lead like someone who understands that silence is the most commanding language in the room. This is the point of no return. No more proving. No more pleading. No more bleeding loyalty for people who only bring knives. You've learned the Machiavellian truth. People are only as loyal as they fear the cost of betrayal. And now, you are the cost. Now, they test the waters. Not to see if you still love them, but to see if you're still weak. They send the "I miss you" text. Not because they miss you, but because they miss who they were around you. The safety, the admiration, the power. They orbit. They linger. They wait for a crack in your composure. But there is none, because you no longer respond to sentiment. You respond to structure. You no longer chase connection. You study pattern. You no longer trust words. You trust behavior repeated under pressure. This is what they fear most. Not that you hate them, but that you finally see them clearly. And in that clarity, you become lethal. Because when your vision sharpens, your tolerance dies. You no longer explain red flags away. You don't try to fix people who enjoy being broken. You don't fight to stay in spaces where you're not mirrored, measured, and met. You're done bending. The version of you who once made excuses for other people's neglect, dead. The version who believed if you just loved harder, they'd finally show up, buried. The version who confused loyalty with self-sacrifice, gone. Now, your loyalty wears armor. Now, your loyalty tests before it trusts. Now your loyalty is a fortress, not a flood. They can't access it anymore. Not because you're closed, but because they never knew how to open you without destroying you. They didn't respect your boundaries when they had access. Now they worship them from the outside. That's the shift. When people realize your love wasn't endless, it was just unreciprocated. When they realize your forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was restraint. When they realize your presence wasn't guaranteed, it was a privilege. And that privilege expired. You didn't become cold. You became correct. They gambled on your kindness. Now they live with your absence. And now they speak of you in past tense. Not because you're gone, but because they are. They tell stories where they still sound like the hero. They rewrite history to make their betrayal seem like growth. They drop your name like a myth, a quiet warning wrapped in flattery. She was intense. He didn't play games. They were too much, but they were real. They say it with admiration, laced with regret, because deep down they know they weren't just disloyal, they were outclassed. And instead of rising, they retreated. Instead of meeting your standards, they mocked them. Instead of becoming someone worthy of your loyalty, they gambled that you'd settle. They bet on the old you, the one who gave too many chances, who hoped too loudly, who loved in ways that made even your silence sound like forgiveness. But that version is never coming back, because you've seen what loyalty given to the unworthy costs. Not just your time, your identity. You became a stranger to yourself trying to become familiar to them. And the price of that self-betrayal? A war no one saw, but you bled in silence. That's the part they'll never understand. You didn't walk away to prove a point. You walked away because you finally saw the point. And now, you're not angry. You're aligned. You're not bitter. You're bordered. You're not guarding your heart. You're governing your kingdom. Because the truth is, most people don't change until they lose the one person who wouldn't break them, even when they deserved it. And that was you. You were the calm after their chaos, the clarity in their confusion, the loyalty they never earned but received anyway. Now they talk about you like a ghost that haunts their future, not because you vanished, but because they'll never be in the presence of that kind of purity with power again. That's your legacy. Not just to be remembered, but to be respected in absence more than you were in presence. Because now, they don't just miss you, They fear the fact that someone else will experience the loyalty they destroyed. They won't say it out loud, but they know it. They know what it means to lose someone irreplaceable. Not loud, not dramatic, not unhinged. Just gone. Gone in a way that makes every new connection feel thinner. Every new face feel performative. Every moment of fake peace feel like counterfeit currency in comparison to what they squandered. And you're not watching anymore. You're not waiting. You're not even looking back. You don't care who they become, because you know they had the chance. With you. And they treated it like it was disposable. They thought your loyalty was a faucet they could turn off and on. They thought your silence was surrender. They thought their access was permanent. And now, they're left with their assumptions. While you move like someone who knows their value doesn't beg to be seen, it defines the space. You don't need closure. You are the closure. You don't need justice. You became the consequence. And this is the power they never saw coming. You became someone who no longer needs to be understood, because you finally understood yourself. They can't play on your empathy anymore. They can't weaponize your kindness. They can't bend your loyalty to fit their convenience, because you don't lead with emotion anymore. You lead with edge. And anyone who thinks they can still betray you knows they'll never get the chance. Because people don't betray those they fear losing. They betray those they assume will never leave. And the day you left, without words, without warning, without wounds, that was the day they lost everything they thought they owned. Now, you are the standard. You are the example they quote when they tell others, "I used to know someone who didn't play games. I had someone who would have gone to war for me. I lost someone who would have never made me doubt them. But they did. And now, the only version of you they'll ever experience again is the one in their memory.